Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Strategic Focus by Network for Security Strategy and Technology. Today, in one of the sessions on the special issue, which is Women and Security, we're joined by Dr. Salma Malik, who is Associate Professor at Quaid-i-Azam University, Islamabad. Dr. Salma bags decades of experience in women, peace, and security, as well as in not just teaching, but in research institutions as well. She has been one of my mentors as well. Dr. Salma, it is such an honor to have you here. You have been our first mentor, and I've seen you mentoring so many students and some who have been with me in the field. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for calling me.
I would go back into a history. What first drew you to security studies, a field that is still male dominated?
First of all, Anum, heartiest congratulations for this initiative and for this venture, because especially given the topic, there are few women who are venturing into these areas, and you are the pioneer here. So you are mentoring us if you think that we have mentored you in any capacity, and I'm so honored by your kind of introduction and appreciation. Okay, so what drew me into this study? When we were studying, as now, there's very little career counseling, to be very honest. I was a military brat. I always kind of liked uniform, and that is that teen age, that is that time frame when you romance the uniform and several other things. But I knew about this subject because several of my uncles and aunts had studied this subject. So I was kind of like, drawn towards it, and it intrigued me as to what security studies or strategic studies are about. So I applied for anthropology as well as strategic studies, and the first call I received was from strategic studies, and I just jumped for it, just went for it, and my family was a bit surprised because I was trained to be an anthropologist, so I went for it. Anyways, once I joined this area, I realized that it's not a piece of cake. Like, many of the jargons, many of the terms were so alien to us, and you really had to put your mind to it. That romantic angle was out. That fact that, oh, you love the uniform and perhaps you'll end up wearing the uniform after 2 years of masters was all over. But it was a very fascinating time because you look at policy making from a very different perspective. And alhamdulillah, we had some great teachers who taught us very well, who gave us a very wide as well as a narrow perspective. So we were looking at both sides of the angle. But fascinatingly, once we were done with our 2 years of masters, and we thought that we ruled the world, and I joined my first job in a research institute, a leading think tank, I realized I knew nothing. Because unfortunately, even to date, our education institutions are training students on very academic grounds. These are not practical trainings. So whatever we learn from our HEIs or through our HEIs is never sufficient enough for young people, especially girls, to go out and apply it immediately. So as a teacher, I feel that we now have to change our perspective and teach the students in a manner that it doesn't take them too much of an effort to transition from a student to a teacher or to a research academic or researcher, and that gap still remains fairly wide.
Right. On that note, would you walk us through, a quick coming back to the present? How did you get here? What were the obstacles that you faced? I mean, I know there must have been many, but if you could just enlighten us.
The journey is from a princess to a professional. You go to a study place, you enter universities, you enter your job scenario with a lot of expectations. First of all, the first myth busting is that you know nothing. Secondly, then you realize that the practical field is something that no one really equips you for. At home, we are very shielded, and that was my typical story. So you live in a bubble. I was an Islamabad person. So the Islamabad people anyways live in a bubble, and I did a lot of learning. My colleagues were very cooperative, yet the fact was that you make a lot of mistakes and you get scolded as well. You are told to repeat things, you are told to do many things, you make a lot of blunders. I remember one of my first blunders was that my boss told me to write on Turkish Cypriots, and I ended up writing on Kurdish people. And when the Greek Cypriot representative visited him, so my boss was reading a summary which was about the Kurdish people, and suddenly he looked at me and I was like, I'm not even here. Don't even look at me. I'm not in this room. But he never ever brought it up, and I was like really scared of him because he was a very formidable person. But still, so you learn a lot. You also face a lot of harassment as you go forward. You face a lot of gaslighting, and I had my fair share of that throughout my time frame. From the day one you start to now, you have at different stages different experiences. When I joined the university as a young teacher, my students who were taller than me, some of them were older than me in age, really kind of like, checkmated me, and they tried to ask me difficult questions. And so you have to really establish your authority. You have to prove that yourself that you're not a woman, you're a professional. And this is actually a very challenging job because for a guy my age who would join the system alongside me, he has to fight just one battle to prove himself as a professional or to do good work. For me, I have to do several things. I not only have to prove myself as a good professional, I have to prove myself that I haven't achieved what I have because I'm a female and I'm a young female. Because any scholarship, any fellowships, any conference that I was invited to, I constantly had to listen to these echoes that, oh, she got this opportunity because she's a young woman. Such and such a foundation likes having women on board, South Asian women, young women, Pakistani women. So you have to really prove it to the people that, no, I have really earned my keep. I have worked hard to achieve this fellowship. What I put on paper was not my gender, was not my being a young woman. I do have brains, I have applied them there. No one would listen to that. And for the guys, the brain was everywhere, right? So these are the things that you would face at all times. Interestingly, our job structure doesn't have the type of discrepancy. I've been in the public and governmental system where you would have the males and the females having different pay packages. So I wasn't ever disadvantaged as a result of that. In fact, in our system, the women have a better tax bracket than the men have. But that too has happened to many of our colleagues, female colleagues who are in the job structure, and they are doing equal work to their male colleagues, but they get less pay because they're women. So these things are something that really put you down. And harassment of various nature would happen. Very open, direct harassment, silent, tacit harassment. And any times, and now I'm senior enough where I lead several inquiries. But honestly, I have seen one thing and observed in my environment that whenever there's a female complainant, she's the one who gets gaslighted first. Oh, she is not happy because ghar pe masle hain, right? Oh, because she fought with her husband.
She's emotional.
She's a very emotional person. Oh, women are emotional. Perhaps she's not happy at home. Perhaps she's not married. Perhaps this, perhaps that. And at the end of the day, most of the harassment complaints get lost in translation, which is a real tragedy. There are very few harassment complaints that the women take a very strong stand and they take the case all the way through. They would even be advised from their home front to go slow, step down, forget about it, chalta hai, koi baat nahi, all of that notion. But these are the issues that happen, and we have to put up with that, and we have to put up a brave face. go home, change our mental uniform, become the daughters, become the wives, become the mothers, then don another uniform, become the perfect hostess, and then the next morning you have to get back to work. And it's a blessing to have a supportive family, a supportive partner, and alhamdulillah, I have both of that. Yeah.
As a mid-career expert in the field, the way I have looked at you and the way you have been where you are now, despite all these challenges, it is, let me tell you, not a very small feat. And we look up to you, and because you did not give up, neither did we, and we would not as well. I hope I can be like you one day.
You are. You're already. You're far better than us. You're far better. I mean, I think when I was young enough to be your age, we weren't so smart, we weren't so confident, we weren't so innovative. And mashallah, when I look at you, I look at your contemporaries, I feel so happy that you people are far braver than we were. And that's a lot to speak for your strength.
That is very kind of you. The way you have, been in the security field for so long, the way you have also not just taught, but also come up with a few definitions about issues related in security, and gave many recommendations on how the security issues can be countered. Do you see that beyond war, beyond borders, beyond military, has the definition of security itself changed? Has it evolved?
Okay. So one of the courses that I teach, it's on war or theories of war. And many times during the class we have a candid debate, because I come from a co-ed system, so we have girls and boys both. And I ask my students as to what they mean by security. So first they have this streamlined response, it's the country's security, it's the border security. Then I said, let's break it down and let's see what security means to each and every one of you. And invariably for women, security is them walking to the bus stop and not getting harassed.
Yes.
Then boarding a public bus and not getting catcalled and several other things. Even for me, my car was my safety net, right? I could go anywhere in my car and I would feel secure. And that was one of the factors. But security, when you actually look at it, now has, especially post-COVID, I think, people have started to look at security from a very, very different angle. And it's no longer something that the state is providing you. It is something that starts from home. It is something where security for a girl is much different from security for a boy. At the same time, when we try to secure girl child so much, we forget that the boy child is also at an equal risk. And unfortunately, the fallout of that insecurity would be to the mother. So directly or indirectly, the woman remains the key point when it comes to the security factor. For a villager, security is very different. It is access to clean water. I remember during the COVID a debate where it was from the CIPRI forum, where people were talking about the best practices to undertake during the COVID. And there was this African lady who talked about the fact that you guys are talking about washing your hands several times when you're exposed to external environment. Do you know it takes us several hours to fetch a pail of water? And then you expect that we'll wash our hands 5 times? No, we are not going to do that. We would rather preserve that water for the entire day. So, I mean, things are very different. It's very contextual. It is very situational. But the fact that people are now thinking beyond those traditional lenses, they're thinking of security as something which is immediate health, immediate security, good education, that has also broadened people's perspective about how to better their life. So if for me, the biggest aim was to come to a Quaid University, get educated. Now for an average girl, the dream is to get a scholarship and come out of the country, go out and seek more education, broaden the horizons. So the horizons are becoming bigger. And for the zillennials like you and the Gen Alpha and the Beta that are coming, things are very different. The way they would look at security is very different. And it's becoming more dangerous as well. what you find in the cyberspace is something that we were not so much exposed to. But the children of today and tomorrow, they have greater challenges. And the grey, black world of the dark web is also something that was not part of our worries and concerns, which are now a massive concern for today's and tomorrow's generation.
On that note, do you see that women scholars, they bring different questions when it comes to priorities into the security research, the kind of lens of security that you provided? How do women bring a different kind of understanding?
Okay, so when I was looking at what to research on, the most fashionable were the strategic aspects, the nuclear issue, the N word, that was making big waves. And I decided to look at something which was more immediate, the impact of light weapons on an average person's life. And many people would come to me and say, why are you talking about this? This has zero appeal. And to me, it was something which was very immediate. That was something that actually happened. God forbid, if the N weapons are ever used, that would be the end of life for everyone, hopefully, that we don't live to see another day after that, if we are attacked or all. But a gunshot victim not only dies, he or she survives and can suffer a lot, or an ID explosion. And these things are happening in the real realm, in the urban setup, in the rural setup. It's everywhere around us and least talked about. And I think that it was only because I was a female that I thought of this more than looking at the nuclear thing, because for me it was something of immediate and micro concern. And many women in my field have done exactly the same. They're looking at aspects which are usually not looked upon by the larger segment of researchers. One aspect. Second aspect was that many of us were consulted when the national security policy was being made. And it was an initiative of one of our colleagues, Dr. Rabia, that we ended up making a gender peace and security cohort that provided feedback for the national security policy. And when we brought this topic up with the NSA at that time, Dr. Yusuf, he was very open to the idea, and he said, absolutely. At best you will get one paragraph, but that's what everyone is getting. And he said, one paragraph is enough for us. And when all of the big wigs in security studies sat together, all the women, suddenly we realized that are we looking at gender or are we looking at women? Exactly. Because gender and women become different. So we had a good laugh and we said, okay, let's talk about gender and women both, because the larger gender is missing from the picture. So one aspect that we always get to see is that the women issue is clubbed with the gender issue a lot more. Both are very nuanced, both need to be separated and studied, and both complement each other, yet they have their own context, they have their own aspects to look into, and there should be no confusion, which usually prevails.
You talked about the national security policy, and we know firsthand that you were also part of that document. Do you see that the things that were provided in there, especially the paragraph on gender and women, has there been any institutionalization of that aspect yet, or we are still far behind?
I think it's something which is ongoing. Unfortunately, we are good at making policies. We are not very good with implementation. The other day, we both were part of a conversation where it was mentioned that we start big, but then we suddenly lose interest. So that is a very unfortunate issue. And plus the fact that the NSP, when it was made, it was done by a particular regime, and then the regime that followed had their own way of looking at it. But the good part is that you have policy makers who are alive to the question of WPS. They are alive to the question of gender, peace and security, both. And they are working in their own capacity to do whatever they can. If it's in sync with the NSP, wonderful. If it is not in sync with the NSP, even then it is great, because things are being done. And all the recommendations that were given in the, which were given by us in the NSP were recommendations which were very realistic, were recommendations which were doable. They were not fictitious aspects, they were not very fantastic. They were things that were implementables. And those implementables are something that anyone can think of and implement. So you can name the thing in any, or package the deal in any capacity, the thing remains the same. So long as those problems are being addressed, an NSP or a national action plan or not, that doesn't really matter. The momentum has to carry on. And I think we are there, yet it's a very, very long and arduous walk.
On that note, if we go, roll back and see what is happening internationally, there are many best practices. For example, IAEA has denoted that it wants 50% women, and they're very close to that, or I suppose they have already achieved that goal. What more can we learn from international practices, from developing states, from international organizations that we can practically apply to not just the government, but research institutions like think tanks and academia?
Yeah. Okay, so one, of course, you've mentioned about a strategic institution having a 50% presence, and they're all part of the larger INGOs, which are actually complementing and mirror imaging each other's practices, having a certain percentage of women as part of this. The second aspect that we see, another issue which is kind of like trickling down at the local level from the international practices, is women in uniform who are part of the UN peacekeeping cohort. So again, they have a certain percentage, and Pakistani women peacekeepers have made ample success stories. They have contributed to a lot of success stories, and they're doing a lot of things. But then you have a certain number of women in security forces, and you cannot really go beyond that. Pakistan doesn't have women in combat operations. We have some young women who are in the Air Force, who are actually into combat fighting situation as well. But at the end of the day, there's always this reservation from back home, where then they train as a fighter pilot, and then they have to step down. That does not really reflect negatively on their professionalism. But the fact is that if you have a young individual who happens to be a woman, who is going into an institution with the consent of her family, then you have to respect that these are the requirements of that job. One aspect. The second thing is, of course, having a certain percentage of women in this job, in various jobs. That is very important. One can actually see that a lot of urban institutions are by default practicing this, because myself as a teacher, when I have to actually choose a class representative, it becomes a very tough job for me, because across the board it's the girls who are performing better, and you hardly have boys in the top 5. So then you have to at times tell the girls to, I need to have a gender balance. So that's actually a very fascinating way of looking at it. But many girls apply to institutes on merit, and they get that thing. What really would change the destiny is where you have fixed quotas, and those quotas need to be supplemented by an equal number of women, or more women. And that is a very tough situation, because with a population which is growing by the numbers, and you have so many men who are not doing the job, and with the type of culture that we have, this becomes a very challenging aspect. So we have to see how this works.
On that note, I would ask last question, but it would be clubbed into two. One is, what would be your advice to women mid-career experts who think that they are just stagnant in the field, and those who are joining just now, or who are planning to join the field? And the second part would be, how would you see a more inclusive Pakistan if women are involved in decision making in security aspect of things?
I would take the second question first. One issue, and this also kind of figures into your second last question that you asked, having a higher number of women doesn't really ensure their presence or their participation. Because what's happening in many areas is that given the compulsion that you have to have an X number of women on the table, the statistics work, but what is their participation in the ultimate decision making is not reflective of the number that there is on the table. So it's not just the mere presence of women, it's also what they say. Are the people listening? Do men have the same patience for a female voice that they have for their male contemporaries? I have seen this happening a lot of times on the table, that if women say something and that makes a lot of sense, they are usually cut down on the time span. And if a man says even half of what they're saying, they're like, oh wow, dude, you have said, what a wonderful thing. I mean, Einstein was glorified, you're the main person, that kind of an approach. So just having women on the table to make the right number doesn't count. Having women who actually say what they have to say and what they say is implemented in the policies and it is reflected in the policies is exactly what will matter. And that will start making the quality change that we are looking for, what you are asking for. And unfortunately, so long that we are seeing is, I mean, you may recall certain countries having a conference on women rights and all men sitting and talking about women rights. So it's virtually that. And even if you have few women sitting on the table, they don't reflect. So for an average woman, it's not only breaking the glass ceiling, it is also breaking the glass walls. It's a fight both horizontal as well as vertical, where you're telling your contemporaries that I also matter, my voice matters and I need to be heard. You do have very accomplished women who would be actually stigmatized by men who turn around and say, are you married? Oh, you're not married, that's why you're so free to say what you have to say. And you know, stuff like that, just to cut them down to their size and to minimize what their intellect is all about.
Just to make them feel less.
Just to make them feel less. So these things would get better because, as I said to you, Anum, that your generation is far braver. You have learned from us who were given the confidence by our mothers, who were housewives, who allowed us to step out and face the world and do something for ourselves. We made a lot of mistakes. We passed on the baton to you people and we told you guys, these were the mistakes that we made, watch out. And you guys were very good students. You have done far better than us. And I'm sure, alhamdulillah, your next generation would outperform you. And you would actually have to tell the boys to speed up the game. But the fact is, and I think the social and societal acceptance of a woman's voice would also incrementally get better. We already have some women who are in policy positions, who are doing what they have to do. But a negative factor to this aspect is, especially when I look at women in security policy making, to make themselves relevant to the cause, they don't bring out a different voice, they don't make a different pitch, they become conformist. So they would actually say the same. In fact, at times they are more conformist, they're more loyaler than the king. So they don't become the queens. To become a queen, you have to have your own sale pitch.
True.
But so far, the game has been to at least make a space for yourself. Once we have done that, I'm quite sure the queens of tomorrow would be able to actually move the table and adjust the table to their own surrounding and to their own comfort.
Thank you very much, Dr. Salma. We'll bring the seat to the table if one is not provided.
Inshallah.
On that note, this has been a brilliant discussion. I want you all to come back again when we would be posting other parts of this podcast as well. please keep watching Strategic Focus, because we're not just focusing on security in traditional terms, we're also focusing on women and security. So see you next time. Thank you for joining us.